Now, would you like to know the secret to losing weight? So I used to be really fat, and I lost the weight, and people are like, how did you do that? And I said, well, it's simple. Eat less, exercise more, right? Does that sound reasonable? Now, did you catch that answer is simple, but it's not easy? Most of the answers to life's tough problems are simple. They're just not easy. Oh, for shame, he's late. So I feel like when he shows up late, it's okay to insult him a little bit. Your hair's growing back, looking better.
Yeah, and it's starting to look good.
Yeah, if I could just get you to shave again. Yeah.
That's tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Once a month, whether he needs it or not. So, on with the story. So that's the secret to losing weight. And it's the secret to so many things, but it's simple but not easy. Now, next question. How many of you think, oh, well, I'll just take Ozempic? I mean, does that never occur? It hasn't occurred to any of you? That's because you're all thin and beautiful, right? But, so, my neighbor's wife took Ozempic, and she I don't recognize her now when I see her on the street, but it has all these side effects that no one tells you about. And then there's all the stuff that's going to happen 5-10 years from now that we have no idea. So, just stick to the eat less, exercise more. Okay, back to the story. We're in chapter 11. We're talking about diversification of portfolio risk. And how many stocks did we say you needed to have a relatively well-diversified portfolio? You just look up here at the chart. About 100, 200, something like that. And so for me, this is fine. I'm a numbers guy, but a lot of people are visual learners. So here we go. This is the same information presented in graphical format. And what we can see is with one stock in our portfolio, the average standard deviation of returns is 49.2%. And then with 10, it's 23.9. So there's a huge jump there, just going from huge drop going from 1 to 10. But notice as we get further and further, oh, for shame, she's late. Further and further out, we get less and less benefit from each additional thing that we add to the portfolio. And so we say that it becomes asymptotic, meaning that it gets very, very close to a line, but it doesn't quite ever reach it. Now, this is interesting though, because it shows us, we can see here, that all the risk in the ground is diversifiable risk. We can get rid of that risk simply by adding more less than perfectly positively correlated stocks to our portfolio. The stuff on the bottom though, the non-diversifiable risk, that's that line, that asymptote that the curve never quite meets. And that is the non-diversifiable risk. We can't get rid of that. We also refer to it as systematic risk. We call it market risk, undiversifiable risk, non-diversifiable risk. All these things mean exactly the same thing. One of the test questions that people always miss is as the number of assets in the portfolio increases, the total risk declines until it approaches, and they always want to say zero, but it's not. This total risk, which is the top line, the curve, the total risk approaches the market risk or unsystematic risk, or systematic risk or undiversifiable risk. And so it's not approaching zero. Of course, we could have also said the diversifiable risk approaches zero, which would also be a true statement. So that's one that, and it trips people up. So once again, in finance, it's always important to read. Questions? Okay. Oh, another thing people miss is they say, well, if we've already got a bunch of assets in our portfolio, if we add just one more, it's really not going to help. And that's wrong. It's going to help, but just not as much, right? And so everything that we add, we get additional diversification benefit. That benefit just gets smaller, smaller, smaller as we get closer out or further out in the number of assets. Questions? Okay. So let's talk about measures of risk. So far, we've talked about standard deviation being our measure of risk, and that is absolutely true. It is a measure of total risk. Total risk. Total risk is your systematic risk plus your unsystematic risk. Total risk is systematic risk plus unsystematic risk. But the market is only concerned with systematic risk. And let's explain why that is. The price or value of anything is the present value of that thing discounted at a rate appropriate to its risk. So we're going to use a very simple valuation thing here. This asset that we're buying promises to pay us $100 at the end of the year. Now, we've got two investors. We've got me, and you already know that I am a well-diversified investor, and so I am only really facing the systematic or undiversifiable risk. You, however, and in fact, I'm going to pick on Samuel because we were talking about getting started in investing today, right? So it's your first investment ever, right? How many stocks does Samuel own right now? Yeah. Now he says, wow, I really like NVIDIA. And so he's going to go out and buy NVIDIA. What does his portfolio look like diversification-wise? It's terribly undiversified, right? Samuel is facing total risk. However, as a diversified investor, I am only facing the systematic risk. And so what does that mean? If Samuel is going to get properly compensated for the risk he's going to take on for that same $100 at the end of the year, Samuel is going to require a higher rate of return, which as R goes up, present value goes down. So Samuel is willing to pay less for that asset than I am because I don't require as high of an R. As a result, I'm dividing by a smaller number. I am willing to pay more for that same asset because I am not bearing all the risk. Now, Samuel and I are in the market and we are bidding on this asset. Who will always win? I will. The diversified investor will always win. Now, does that mean that Samuel cannot buy the asset? Of course, Samuel can buy the asset, but will he be getting rewarded for the risk he's taking on? No. So the non-diversified investors are not setting the prices in the market. It's the diversified investors. And so that's why in finance, what we really care about is systematic risk. And so we need to have a measure of systematic risk. And that measure is called beta. Beta, it's that curly B. It's a Greek letter, and that's going to be our measure. And we're going to talk about how to calculate beta and what it really means. Any questions? So there's a question there at the end of the screen. I've already covered it, and I'm going to ask someone right now if they could tell me why is the market only concerned with systematic risk?
Because the other risk can be diversified away.
Yeah, and who is setting the prices in the market?
The diversified investors.
Diversified investors. Thank you. Okay, now let's talk about how we calculate beta. We're used to having risk on one axis and return on the other. In this case, we've got return on both axes. And what we're doing is plotting returns on a given stock versus the return on the market. And so the plot gives us what is this relationship between those two. And we can see that, or I should say, the slope on this line. By the way, this line has a name. It's the characteristic line. I'm going to talk to you. I've already talked to you about the capital market line, right? That was on the CAPM stuff. And now we're talking about the characteristic line. And before the day is over, I'm going to tell you about a third line, so don't get your lines confused. So this characteristic line, it turns out that the slope of the line is beta. Well, what is slope? My grandfather would have said, rise over run. In fact, I'm taking a construction class right now, and they're talking about pitch on a roof, and that's exactly how they call it. They call it rise over run. Now, if we're mathematicians, it's going to be delta y over delta x. What does delta mean?
Change.
Yeah, change in. And so what we're really talking about here is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So, by the way, how many points does it take to define a line? 2, just 2. Okay, now let's talk about why the slope of this thing is beta. The systematic risk, we're saying, is a measure of how much this thing moves versus an equivalent move in the market. And so if our stock is, if the market is up 1 and our stock is up 1, then we say that's got a beta of 1. But if the market is up 1 and the stock is up 2, then we say the beta is 2. Okay, so this is how this relationship works. Here we can see that the slope of this line is 1.5. If the market is up 2%, how much is the stock expected to be up? 3%. 3%, who said that? Wow, I've actually got 2 people to catch it today. I'm not going to give either one of them credit for their athletic prowess. It was me, all me. Okay, so yeah, if the market's up 2%, the stock's going to be up 3%. And you're saying, wow, what if the beta were like 8 and the market were up 1%, my stock would be up 8%. And you're saying, wow, that sounds great. What's the catch?
If the market's down 1%.
Yeah, if the market's down 1%, then your stock is down 8%. And so you remember we talked about how risk is the roughness. And so if you've got a beta of 0, this thing, by the way, that's the beta of the risk-free asset, 0. Why? Because it has no risk. So we've got this risk-free asset here, and as the market goes up and down, it just stays steady, steady, steady. So the risk there is 0. Now, what about a stock with a beta of 1? By the way, the beta of the market is 1. How do I know? When the market's up 1%, how much is the market up? 1%. When the market's down 2%, how much is the market down? 2%. Do you see that it's beta of 1? Because we're just comparing against the market. Okay, if I've got a beta of 1, it may look something like this. It's going to perfectly follow the risk in the market. Now, if I've got a beta of 2, now it's starting to look like this. And if I've got a beta of 8, you see how crazy it gets? So, risk averse, if you're risk averse, are you going to be buying these stocks with a beta of 8 and just holding? No. Okay, now, beta of 8 would be crazy. I don't know if there are any beta of 8 out there. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, what does it look like for a company that's a beta of 8?
So every time that we have one of these discussions, someone asks, and then I have to go home and pull up my Charles Schwab. No, I couldn't tell you right this minute what the highest beta is, but you can go out there to, if you have an account, and you can do a sort, and sort in descending order of beta or a filter, and figure out what are some really, really high beta stocks. Now, am I telling you not to buy high beta stocks? Perfectly fine to buy high beta stocks, but you should be holding them in a diversified portfolio. Does that make sense? Okay. In fact, it's perfectly fine to buy all the stocks as long as you hold them in a diversified portfolio because they are all fairly priced. In an efficient market, they're all fairly priced. Okay, so if the stock returns more when versus the market, that line's going to be steeper. If it's less risky, if it's got a lower beta, that line's going to be shallower. So let's talk about some betas for some different stocks. First of all, American Electric Power. What do you think that American Electric Power produces? Electric power, very good. No, you're not going to get a coin for that one. Okay, electric power. Now, let's talk about the demand for electric power. We do have some industrial use of electricity in the United States. When the economy goes up, we would expect to see that industrial production go up. We would expect to see electricity consumption go up. And therefore, it would make sense that the stocks of these electric utilities would go up. However, industrial production in the United States is only a small portion of electricity production or electricity consumption. Where do you think most of our electricity is consumed?
Residential.
Say again?
Residential.
Oh, so let's talk about in the U.S. Where are we consuming it?
Yeah, it's industrial.
Homes.
Homes. Oh yeah. In fact, like 70% of the electricity we consume goes to heating, lighting, all that sort of stuff. So, the question is this: what happens to that kind of consumption during bad economic times? So remember, the relationship is the economy does this. What does the market do in response? What does our stock do in response to that? And this beta is the relationship between our stock and what the market's doing, but it all goes back to the economy. If you found out today that you were getting laid off, would you go home and sit in the dark? No. No. Would you turn off your furnace or your electric heater? No. And so what we see is that though electricity consumption may go down during bad economic times, it doesn't swing nearly as much as the market overall. Therefore, it's less risky than the overall market. Remember, I told you the other day, my dad, he said, well, his portfolio is safe because he only has electric utilities. This is why it's safe, is because his beta is low. But what does that also mean about his return? Yeah, his low returns. Okay, now let's move on to Johnson & Johnson. What does Johnson & Johnson make?
Baby products.
Say again?
Baby products.
Okay, baby products, that's one of their things. By the way, what's happened to the market for baby products? What's happened to the birth rate? Yeah, you all need to get busy. Birth rate's way down. Yes, this is the problem. People are like, you and your wife should have a kid. And I'm like, yeah, society would benefit from that and I would bear all the cost. And once again, I would be thrilled for you guys to, this is a brand new one, it's acting goofy. Okay, I would be thrilled for you guys, if you're into that, to go out and make babies. And here's why. Social Security, right? Someone needs to pay my Social Security. This is also why I'm perfectly good on legal immigration. Bring them in, sign them up. I want them to pay. Okay. So, luckily though, baby stuff is only a small part of Johnson & Johnson, so it's not going to destroy them. What else do they do?
Vaccines. Vaccines.
Can you spell that for me?
Vaccines. Vaccines.
Vaccine.
Vaccines! Okay, thank you. Sorry. You were doing the correct English pronunciation. I could not understand. Okay, so vaccines. He's absolutely right. Now, vaccines have gotten kind of crazy lately. People get mixing politics with vaccines, so we'll skip lightly over that. If I say Johnson & Johnson,
Band-Aid.
yeah, bandages, right? Bandages. So here you go. You just got word at work that you're getting laid off. And you go home to make yourself a sandwich. And you're not thinking about things and you chop the end of your finger off. It happens. Do you say, oh damn, the times are tough, so I'll probably just let it bleed? No! And so most of the stuff that Johnson & Johnson would be called healthcare stuff. And so we say people maybe would let the Band-Aid run a little longer if times were tough, but they're not going to go without. And so that's why we see that they've got a relatively low beta too. What about Tyson Foods? What's their big product? Okay, so that's relatively new. What's the original purpose? Chicken, and it's still probably their biggest business, right? Okay, so Tyson Foods, chicken. Why would Tyson Foods have a relatively low beta compared to, say, a company that produces beef?
Chicken's cheap.
Chicken is cheap. Did you know it only takes 4 pounds of feed to create a pound of meat on a chicken? It creates 10 pounds of feed to create a pound of meat on a cow or steer. What does that mean for the end result? Beef has to be more expensive, right? The inputs are greater. Now, when you get a promotion at work, what do you say? Honey, let's go out for a...
Steak.
Yeah. Nobody says, ooh, I just got a big promotion. Let's go out for chicken! Right? Okay, so a beef company would have a higher beta than this, but of course Tyson's more of a chicken company. Now it does have Iowa beef packers now, but still low beta comparatively. Allstate, what does Allstate do?
Insurance.
Yeah, insurance, and they look like they're roughly the same as the market. And so is 3M. What does 3M do?
Adhesives.
Say again? Adhesives, very good. Adhesives, what else? I'll give you a hint. It's a boatload of things, right? It's a boatload of things, and they're in a bunch of different industries. So if you look at 3M, it really is a diversified portfolio of businesses. And it really makes a lot of sense that it's just basically they go along with the market. It's not really high tech, it's not really low tech, it's just more like the market than anything else. Okay, Hewlett-Packard and Dell. Both of those are computer companies, and now we're starting to see things that are riskier than the market. Now let's ask ourselves this. If you are running a business and times are good, you end up with maybe some extra cash at the end of the year, you say, let's go ahead and replace our computers. But you're at the end of the year and things are really bad. What do? They can go on for another year. Yes, I can get you a new keyboard because that one's been chewed on by rats, but we're not going to go out and buy a bunch of new computers. And so you can see why their business would be actually riskier than the overall market. And then we have an oddity up here. This, by the way, this slide's really old. The slide's old. This is American International Group. And here's the story behind this amazing beta of American International Group. By the way, American International Group is an insurance company like Allstate. What should its beta be? By the way, businesses in similar industries usually have similar betas, right? Why is this one so high? And the answer is this. Before the financial crisis, they sold all sorts of insurance products on some really risky crap that they did not understand. And their stock price went way up. But then things got so bad during the financial crisis that AIG almost collapsed. If it had not been for the federal government jumping in and catching them before they hit the pavement, they would have been dead. This beta represents the bounce back afterward. The government bails them out, and now they're on the long march back, and that's why their beta is higher than that. I'll bet money, if we looked them up right now, that the beta would be closer to 1. In fact, are you guys up for an adventure?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. AIG stock. Let's see. Yahoo Finance, they usually have beta. Beta 0.6. You see what? Yeah, that was an artificial thing. Now, can I explain why it's 0.6 now? No, I would expect it to be closer to like 0.88 like Allstate. In fact, let's see if Allstate's there and let's see what they're looking like these days. That is not. .23. Oh my goodness. goodness. I'm gonna have to figure out what's happened to insurance here. Apparently, it's far less risky than it used to be. Who knew? Okay, back to the story.
Would that be because of the Florida markets? Like, aren't there a lot of the insurance companies pulling out Florida?
You know, it could be. Insurance companies, because of government regulation, have decided to pull up stakes in a lot of the riskier markets. As a result, you would expect the risk of the company overall to go down. I like that. Actually, I have one coin left, and I think you've earned it. Whoa! Now that one really was him. Okay. And Samuel, thank you for ducking. Okay, here we go. Okay, that's it. Oh, now, by the way, there's a formula at the bottom of this thing. Do you see that? Do you think that formula should be on your note sheet? Yes. Yes. So beta is the covariance of the return on the stock with the return on the market divided by the variance of the return on the market. Yeah.
Is beta something that changes on like a day-to-day basis, noticeably changes on a day-to-day?
Not-
Or is it?
It's not going to fluctuate a lot day to day. As long as the basics of the business stay the same, it shouldn't be changing. Why are we saying that the insurance companies' betas have changed? Probably because the nature of the business has changed. But no, on a day-to-day, it should be more stable. And one of the reasons it is we have to, and we're going to see this, we have to have a series of days over which to look at it. And so basically, we're looking at the last, in this case, it says 5 months, or on Yahoo Finance, they were using the last 5 months. Why the hell 5 months? I would go with 6 or a year, right? But they're weird. So 5 months, but how much is one return going to impact 5 months worth of data? Very little. Good question. Other questions?
What are the, I can't see like the sub letters, is it?
Oh, man. So it's R sub I, covariance of R sub I.
Okay.
Here, let me write this big. Covariance. It's the return on the stock with the return on the market divided by the variance of the return on the market. And you may see it written this way. Covariance, RIRM, divided by variance of the return on the market. Then I could also throw in there correlation, R sub I with R sub M. By the way, covariance, or correlation, covariance divided by standard deviation, right? So if I could substitute here, standard deviation, R sub I, standard deviation, R sub M, divide by the variance of R sub M. And what happens here? Yeah, we go whoop, and we are left with correlation times the standard deviation of R sub I divided by the standard deviation of R sub M. By the way, this is a great formula to have on your note sheet for the exam. This is a great formula to have on your note sheet for the exam. I'll read that to you one more time. It's the correlation of R sub I with R sub M. By the way, I is the stock, M is the market, multiplied by the standard deviation of the return on the individual stock, divided by the standard deviation of the return on the market portfolio.
What's the thing again, the P or what is it?
This is an R. Rho.
Sorry?
Rho.
Row?
Yeah. This is a Greek letter rho.
What does it represent?
Correlation.
Correlation.
Yeah. And this is covariance. still writing, so I'm gonna take a little breather here. You're digesting, I like it. Okay. Now, let's talk about calculating beta for a portfolio. If you think back to standard deviation, we said we can't just take the equal weighted standard deviations of the things, or the weighted average of the standard deviations, simply because we had this diversification that could happen. So we couldn't do that. However, with beta, is any of the beta risk diversifiable? No, absolutely not. And so what does that mean? It means that we can just do a weighted average of the betas in the portfolio, and that will give us the beta for the overall portfolio, because there is no diversifying systematic risk, which is what beta measures. And so we see down here at the bottom, the beta of the portfolio is just equal to, and we're going to take the portfolio weight for A. You guys remember how to do the portfolio weight? We take the market value of the security, divide by the market value of the portfolio, that gives us the portfolio weight. What do the weights have to add up to be? Yeah, 100% of 1, right? And so then we're going to take those weights and multiply them by the betas of the individual assets, and lo and behold, that will give us the beta for the overall portfolio. Now we are on to the third line for the day. It's the security market line. And the security market line tells us what things should return given their beta. Now, on the vertical axis, once again, we have return. And on the horizontal axis, we're back to having risk, but this time, the risk is a different risk. It's not standard deviation, it's beta. It's not standard deviation, it's beta. And so what we see here, we've got this line, and I'll show you how we came up with this line, but the general idea is this. If you tell me the beta of a stock, I should be able to go to this chart and find that beta, and then go over to the left-hand side and figure out how much expected return there is given that risk. By the way, expected return, once again, is just a scientific wild-ass guess, right? But it's the best guess we've got. Okay, now let's talk about lines. If you grew up in the United States and you had any education at all, you should have seen this formula right here. What is that?
Slope.
Slope-intercept form of the line, right? If you grew up basically anywhere else in the world, you probably saw it written like this. Is that what you guys saw? Yes, of course. Okay, Americans are weird, right? With our 8.5 by 11 paper. Yeah. By the way, the rest of the world doesn't use that. It's called A4. Right? They're not the same thing. Did you know that? Blew my mind when I figured that out. Back to the story. Okay, so N is equal to A is equal to the slope. And earlier we said slope is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. We need to figure out the locations, the coordinates for 2 points on this line. And the first one's really easy. Remember we said what had a beta of 0? Yeah, the risk-free rate. And so our first point is 0, comma, risk-free rate. That's X and that's Y. Is that the right order to do that, X then Y? Yeah. So we're going to do 0 and the risk-free rate. And the other thing I told you that we knew the beta of was the market portfolio. What did we say the beta of the market is? 1. Now we're going to call this the expected return on the market. By the way, why is this one an expected return, but this one is just the number? Yeah, this one's known with certainty, right? And how do we know it certainly? Because it's the risk-free rate. We know what it's going to be. Do we know what this one's going to be? Now, this is a scientific wild-ass guess. Okay, now, let's do the slope. Y2 minus Y1. What's Y1? Yeah, the risk-free rate. So we're going to call this 1 and this 2. So it's going to be the risk-free rate. And on the bottom, we're going to have x2, 1, minus 0. And what's going to happen to this on the bottom? It's going to become 1. And if we divide something by 1, what do we get? Yeah, that thing, right? So this all just goes away, and that just gives us the expected return on the market minus the risk-free rate. This thing has a special name. We call it the market risk premium. Market risk premium. Why is that the market risk premium? Well, remember, the risk premium is where we take the expected return of anything and subtract the risk-free rate. That's the market risk premium on that thing. So if we take the expected return of the market and subtract the risk-free rate, that gives us the market risk premium. That gives us the market risk premium. Now, by the way, test question students always get wrong. What is the slope of the security market line? The answer is the market risk premium. The slope of the security market line is the market risk premium. What do students usually say? They usually say beta. They usually say beta. The only thing beta is the slope of is the characteristic line, which is the last line we talked about. Yeah, okay, so the slope of the security market line is the market risk premium. So we just calculate a slope right here, and we said that this thing has another name. It's the market risk premium. So the slope of the security market line is the market risk premium. Okay, so we have the slope. What is B in this formula? Risk-free rate. Okay, you're skipping ahead. In the world of algebra, this sexy dog has a name. What is it? It's the y-intercept, right? The y-intercept. Now, the definition of the y-intercept is the value of y when x is 0. The value of y when x is 0. What is the value of our y-axis when x is 0? And now I go back to Nick. The risk-free rate, right? And so now we can write this out. And by the way, y here is going to be the expected return on the stock is equal to, and then we're going to put our slope in here, the expected return on the market minus the risk-free rate. And we're going to multiply by that and we're going to call it beta sub I, because the beta's got to be the beta for the stock, or this doesn't work. And then we're going to just add the risk-free rate here on the end of the equation. How many times does the risk-free rate show up in the equation? Twice, right? One of the things you're going to have to watch out for when you're doing calculations is to read and see, did I give you the expected return on the market? If I did, you'll need to subtract the risk-free rate out before multiplying it by beta. But what if I give you the market risk premium? Then you don't subtract out the risk-free rate. So be sure to read, because you can be in a hurry and get yourself in a world of hurt. Okay, now this is the equation. However, we typically write it in a different way. But before we get into that, I want to show you an interesting thing. What if I subtract the risk-free rate from both sides? So I subtracted it, and then of course it's going to cancel out over here. Here's this cool result. The risk premium for stock I is equal to the market risk premium multiplied by beta for stock I. So let's say beta is 3. What does that mean? It means that the risk premium for this stock is going to be 3 times as high as the market risk premium. What if beta is 1/2? Then the risk premium on the stock will be half of that on the market. Keep in mind, any risk premium is a reward for bearing risk. And beta is the number of times that you are taking on the market risk. So if you're taking on 3 times as much market risk, what would you expect for a risk premium? 3 times as much. Does that make sense? I don't know what's wrong with this thing. Okay, there we go. Okay, now, how do we usually see this written? We usually see it written like this. Expected return on stock I is equal to, we usually put the beta first, let's see. Yeah. Oh, what the hell. Here we go. Is equal to the risk-free rate plus beta sub I times the expected return on the market minus the risk-free rate. And I think this may be why students get confused and think that beta is the slope of this thing, but we just kind of shuffle things around. What's one of the cruelest things I could do to you mathematically? I could give you this, this, and this, and ask you to calculate the risk-free rate. Wouldn't that be the toughest calculation because R sub F shows up twice in there? You guys would have to actually dig out your dusty high school algebra brain, right, to make that work. If you're concerned about algebra, what should you do? Watch video, and then if you figure, so you can sit down while you're relaxed and sober, and you come up with the correct equation, and then what do you do with it? Put it on your, your note sheet. Questions? Okay. Now let's talk about different betas. If I have a beta of 0, throw beta 0 into this equation, what do I get back?
Risk-free rate.
Yeah, it's just risk-free rate, because anything times 0 is 0, so that last term goes away. Now, what if I throw a beta of 1 in there? It's the risk-free rate plus the expected return on the market minus the risk-free rate. What does that simplify down to? Just the expected return on the market, because that plus RF and minus RF just cancel out and go away. So far, so good, right? What happens if beta goes negative? What happens if beta goes negative? Let me ask you this. Will the return be higher or lower than the risk-free rate if beta goes negative? Yeah, it's going to be lower than the risk-free rate. Oh my goodness, is your mind blown? We could actually, with a negative beta, would have a return less than the risk-free rate. And you say, wait a minute, why would any idiot invest in a negative beta stock? Might as well just buy the risk-free asset. And the answer has to do with when do negative beta stocks pay off. So let's talk about normal times. The market's going up. Your positive beta stocks, what are they doing? If the market's going up and it's got a positive beta, what's happening to the stock? Yeah, it's got to go up too, right? And so your portfolio is paying you well. By the way, the economy is in good shape. You've probably got a job. You may even be getting bonuses and pay raises. At that point, do you care what the negative beta stock is doing? No. Now, economic bad times hit. You lose your job. you no longer any bonuses, your wife leaves and takes your dog and your pickup truck. It could be a country song. Now, what's happening to your overall portfolio? What's the value of your positive beta stocks doing? Taking a huge dump just when you need it the most. But the negative beta stock, what's it doing, Yara? Yeah, it's going up. We put up with bad behavior from negative beta stocks most of the time because they pay off when we need it most. So it's called the marginal utility of consumption. I know you thought that you would learn nothing of value in your economics class, but you did, hopefully, if you paid attention. Marginal utility of consumption. Okay, utility is the benefit or use or happiness you get out of something. Marginal is how much does the next unit of that thing bring. Consumption is things like food, shelter, the things that we consume as we go. Okay, now I will tell you two stories to help bring home this point. When I was in college as a freshman mechanical engineering student, my roommate's dad came to visit, and he was a big deal civil engineer down in Houston, Texas. He was making, at the time, this was good money. He was making $55,000 a year, which in 1989 was good money. Okay, so he comes in, and we are sitting there, and we are complaining about the high price of textbooks. One of these textbooks that we had just purchased had cost $100. By the way, that was real money then, right? $100. And he says, and I quote, $100, I puts $100 up against the wall. What does he mean? To him, $100 isn't very meaningful. Why? Because he's already got $55,000. So 100 extra to him was not a big deal. Of course, my response was, hey, piss my way, right? Because $100 meant a heck of a lot to me at that point in my life. Okay, now I'm going to bring it down to an even more organic level to you. Spring break's coming up, and you have decided you're going to go down to the Mark Twain National Forest and go out for a hike. And you take your phone along the way, and you're doing TikToks and Instagram and all that kind of crap. And then it's starting to get a little dark, and you're like, well, I should probably make my way back to the car. But you have gotten lost, and you say, no worries, I'll just use the GPS on my phone. But your phone is dead because you've been doing TikTok all afternoon. Great 8-second clips, but your phone is dead. Now, you say, how do I handle this? And so you say, well, I will just, and by the way, if this ever happens to you, you just sit in one place and wait, right? What's easier to find, something that's sitting still or something that's moving? Something that's sitting still. Okay, so you're out there, and the first day goes by, and nobody has come to find you, and you're getting a little hungry. And so you try to eat some grass, and you figure out that without ranch dressing, grass is just grass, right? You gotta have a little something to spice it up. And so then you're like, what about tree bark? So you try gnawing, this is day 2, you try gnawing on some tree bark, really not that good. Day 3 comes, you are truly hungry, and you catch some crickets. And you figure out that they're kind of crunchy and they taste funny, so you can't do that. So now you're really, really, really hungry, and you're desperate because obviously no one is looking for you. And so what do? You decide that you're gonna start wandering out to try to find help for yourself. And so you break loose of the tree line, and there standing in a clearing, that's me out there in the clearing, and I've got a nice food safe glove on, and I'm holding a hot dog. Now, if you're vegan, it's a vegan dog. If you're Muslim, it's halal dog. If you're Jewish, it's a kosher dog. It's whatever kind of dog is gonna trip your trigger, right? Okay, so there I am, and you come out of the woods, and you look at that hot dog, and you say, how much? I say, how much are you willing to pay for the hot dog? Samuel, how much are you willing to pay for the hot dog?
Anything that will give me.
Yeah, so he's gonna go all in, and I would tell you, never do that. Always lowball your first offer. So Samuel says $10. I say no, 20. Now, could I probably get more than 20 out of Samuel? Of course I could, but I'm not Disney. I'm not gonna be like that trying to sell you a hot dog for $30. You ever been to Disney World? What the hell? Okay, back to the story. Now, you give me $20. I give you the hot dog. Right? And you're like, whoa, that was really satisfying. I say, whoop, hot dog number 2. How much will you pay me for it? Less, why? Oh, you're not full. I could do 2 hot dogs, maybe 3, right? Of course, I am an American. We do eat a lot. Okay, so not as much, right? Now, I'm going to keep producing these hot dogs, and each one of them is going to be worth less and less to you until finally, what do you say? Yeah, no more. Get the hot dog. I can't even stand the smell at this point, right? Now, here's the difference between money and hot dogs. Additional money never made me sick, right? As my dissertation advisor told me, the marginal utility consumption of an additional $1 is always positive. Now, it doesn't matter how rich you get. If someone said, would you take another $1? Yeah, not true with hot dogs. Okay, so that's the whole idea of marginal utility consumption. So, what is a negative beta stock? It's like your professor standing in the clearing with the first hot dog. You are happiest to see me when you are hungriest. You are happiest to see your negative beta stocks when times are really bad. Questions?
Times are bad, negative beta stocks pay off.
Yep.
A little bit. If times are good, you lose money on negative
Oh,
beta
yeah.
stocks. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So it is a direct, like it's correlation.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So one time, but why do you not care? Because you're doing well at your job and your positive beta stocks, which by the way is the overwhelming majority. In fact, I was teaching this class and the one version of the book said about negative beta stocks. The next edition said, negative beta stocks do not exist. I'm like, did you people smoke some weed between this edition and this edition? And so just to make sure that I wasn't the one that was high, I went home and pulled out my stock screener and found some negative beta stocks. And here is the very most common negative beta stock, gold mining stocks. Now, why would that be? When times are good, do people put their money in the stock market or in gold? The stock market, right? 23% on the S&P return, S&P 500, whew, I'm there, right? But when times are bad, where do people put their money? Gold, right? Okay, so what does this mean? So when times are good, gold prices are down. And let's think about what's going on at the gold mining companies. I'll get to you in a second. Their profit is whatever money they could sell the gold for minus their expenses. Now, do you think their expenses fluctuate that much with the price in gold? No, they pretty much stay the same. And so basically their profit is totally dependent on this price of gold. And so during bad economic times, when gold prices are very high, the profits are very high at gold mining companies. And when the economy is doing great, gold prices are down, profits are down at gold mining companies, so their stocks are down. What was your question?
So are we technically in bad times since gold's...
Okay, so there's 2 things that drive people toward gold. One of them is the bad economy. I'm going to park my money in there. The other is uncertainty. Do we live in an uncertain world? Absolutely. So we have, by the way, have we always lived in an uncertain world? Yeah. Everyone wants to look back and think that previous times were less uncertain because we know how they turned out, right? But at the time, you're old enough to remember when the Russians were still a threat. I guess they're back. But different kind of Russians. Yeah, different kind of Russians. But it was, yeah, your arm was right here. No, we were tell you straight up, we were scared shitless of you people. And it's because they had nuclear weapons aimed at us. Now, Yarrow would say, wait a minute, Grandma said you had it aimed at us too. Yeah. But that was a big thing. And there was all sorts of uncertainty. Now we want to look back on it, and those were the good old days. Well, it's because we know how the story ended, right? But what do we got today? Well, we've got a war. The Russians are back. We've got a war in Ukraine. We have this whole tariff thing. We have, well, the court's going to reverse the tariff. Oh, well, now the tariff's got to be refunded. Well, what the hell? We have a lot of deregulation, which deregulation long-term will lead to growth, but in the meantime, is there uncertainty? Oh, yeah. And we've got people in the streets killing each other. And not for the normal reasons, you know, not like I want those sneakers kind of killing. We're talking about political violence. And so, yeah, there's lots of uncertainty. And during times like that, people put money into gold. Yeah, so bad economic times are uncertain times.
So I have a question about the correlation. If there's a good time, then the price of gold is up, but if there's a bad time, the price of gold is
Opposite.
down. Is it because of the people don't have money, they're not gonna buy jewelry, so we're not gonna buy fancy stuff?
No. It goes the other way, Yarrow. When times are good, gold prices go down. And when times are bad, gold prices go up. And it's because gold is a kind of a safe haven asset. If the world's going to shit, you put all your money into gold. In fact, I've literally known people who had gold buried in their backyard, which I think is a bad move. But now, let's talk about why that is. Why is gold not a good investment in good economic times? Because gold does not create wealth. Gold does not create wealth. I can go out and invest money in a machine, and the machine I can use to create wealth, right? And I can use that machine for 20, 30 years to manufacture something, and I can make lots and lots of money with that. Here's my proof to you that gold does not create wealth. I want you to go out and I want you to buy 2 gold bars. And I want you to take all the packaging off of them, and I want you to lay them right next to each other in your safe. And then I want you to go back 9 months later and open the door. Do you think there will be a bunch of little gold bars? No! No, gold doesn't work that way. Does that make sense? Gold doesn't create wealth. Now, in fact, gold consumes wealth. What do I mean? If I've got a pile of gold, can I leave it in my front yard? No. What would happen? It gets stolen, right? Now, you say, well, wait a minute, I'm not that stupid. I'll put it on my coffee table in full view of the front window. What still happens? Yeah, now you got a broken window too, right? And then you say, well, wait a minute, I'll close the curtains and I'll only tell my closest friends. What still happens? They still rob you, right? So what do I have to do? Well, I have to either pay to have the gold stored, or I need to invest in a big old safe that's going to keep people from easily accessing my gold. Either way, it is consuming wealth to store gold. I was having this conversation with a lawyer buddy of mine, and he said, what would we, he says, assume you and I are the guys that are paid to sit on the pile of gold with our shotguns and make sure nobody takes it. He says, now the shit hits the fan. What do you and I do? Take the gold, right? So, gold sounds safe, but it actually consumes wealth, right? And there's a chance that if things go terribly wrong, that you'll lose it all anyway. Questions?
Are there other precious material that it works like gold?
Yeah. So actually, what I would prefer to invest in instead of gold would be platinum. Because even if the speculative value goes out of platinum, it still has industrial uses. For example, how many of you have cars? If you've got a car, you already have some platinum. Where's the platinum in your car? It's actually a catalytic converter. Catalytic converter and sometimes spark plugs. It's very a small amount, but why do you think it's so good, or sorry, I shouldn't say good. Why is it so profitable for people to steal your catalytic converter? Yeah, platinum, rhodium, all sorts of stuff like that. So if I don't own any precious metals, fair disclosure here, but if I did, I would go with something that had an industrial use. Silver has an industrial use, but gold, not so much. And once again, if you're going to make investments in something like that, it should be, kind of like the old cereal commercials would say, part of a well-balanced breakfast. You want it to be part of a well-diversified portfolio if you're going to make investments like that. Questions?
Does it up in that equation if there's an infusion of the precious metals, like they find a gold mine someplace, or if they start mining gas fields or something?
Oh yeah, he brings up a great point. So roll back with me. The year is 1492. The Spanish have finally ran the last of the Muslim conquerors out of the Iberian Peninsula, and they send a guy named Chris Columbus not to find the New World. He just did that by accident, right? But he gets over here and he's like, damn, these people have gold and silver. And so the Spaniards, they take over the world's most productive silver mine. And then all these silver coins start flowing back to Spain. What do you think happened to the value of silver? Yeah, it's just like when the government prints more money. So people, I don't have to go to the New World to get some more of the silver. I just have to charge 2 silver coins for a haircut instead of 1, right? And so before long, the price of everything goes up, which means the value of the silver has actually gone down. And so when people say, oh, that asteroid contains $1 trillion worth of gold. No, it contains $1 trillion worth of gold at today's market values. If we were to lasso that and bring it home, it's not going to be worth $1 trillion because the value of all gold will fall. Questions? Do diamonds other than industrial diamonds have intrinsic value? It's just the value we place on them, right? Why do you think lab-grown diamonds totally destroyed the market for natural diamonds? Okay. Wow, we got way off in the weeds there. It's good talk, though. Questions? Okay. Now, I hopefully can find. Let's see. I'll do this one example and then we'll get out of here. Okay, so this, download, come on. So what have I got here? I have a bunch of stock returns for General Electric and for basically the S&P 500. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the return, I'm going to regress the risk premium of General Electric on the risk premium of the market, and I'm going to use that to estimate beta. So how do I do that? Well, the first thing I have to do, I can tell that it's not been installed yet, so I'm going to have to go to File and More, and then Options, and then Add-ins, and then go. They don't make it easy. I'm going to click on Analysis Toolpack, and voila, there it is under the data. I'm going to click this, and it does all sorts of amazing things, but for our purposes today, all we're interested in is a regression. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to input my Y range. Remember, my Y here is the risk premium on General Electric. By the way, if I do the risk premium over here, what should my y-intercept be? It should be 0. Should be 0. So I'm going to input this y range, and it's right here, and that's just the risk premium on GE. By the way, where did I get the risk-free rate? Any of the 12 Federal Reserve banks, they all have these data collections that you can go out and use for free. So that's where I got that. Where did I get the stock prices? From Yahoo Finance. Why do I prefer Yahoo Finance for this sort of thing? They have historical prices on tap. Other places don't necessarily. By the way, do you see what year I collected this data? 2007? How old were you guys?
40.
Oh, I feel so old. By the way, does it matter what year the data's from? No. The process is the same regardless. Okay, and now I'm going to say okay. And here's what we have. Come on. Okay, so the first thing that I want to point out is R squared. R squared is a measure of how much of the variation of this thing can be accounted for with the variation of this thing. And in this case, it's 0.6 or 60%. You say, wait a minute, 60%, is that any good? I would get a D and not pass this class if I had a 60%. You're right. But with linear regression, using data that actually comes in from the wild, that's actually pretty good. I have publications where my R squared was just like 0.02, 0.03, where I found something tiny and they were silly enough to publish it. I'm good for that. In mechanical engineering, what do you think our R squareds look like? 0.98, 0.99, because we're dealing with physical phenomena. By the way, finance is a social science. Did you guys know that? Every market transaction is a record of an interaction between two people. And so what do we know about people? Are people purely rational? No. Do they exhibit the constant strength that a bar of steel would? No. It depends on the time of the day and how much they've had to drink. I mean, there's all sorts of things that can just make people squirrely. And so you're never going to see probably a perfect R square in these situations because we've got people involved. And there's also some diversifiable risk in GE stock that's not being accounted for with the movements of the market. So there are a couple of reasons why it wouldn't be higher than that. Now, next thing we want to look for, we'll roll down here, and this intercept, we said it was going to be 0. In actuality, it is 0.00007, right? Close enough to 0 for me to say it's okay. Plus, by the way, the t-stat is minus 0.15. Is that statistically significant? No, I don't think of anything being statistically significant that's less than 1.64, so we are way away from being statistically significant. Okay, now, what else have we got here? What about this coefficient on x variable 1? Well, it turns out that is beta for the stock. And so the beta for GE during this time period was 0.89. Is it safer or riskier than the market? That's a little safer, but it's probably closer to the market. We would say it's basically as risky as the market. Kind of makes sense because of the kinds of things that GE was into. Not extraordinarily high-tech stuff, not extraordinarily low-tech stuff. So yeah, it kind of makes sense. Now the next question is it statistically significant? Look at that t-value, 19.33. I know people in my field who would kill for a t-stat that high, right? If I could come up with some sort of new research and my t-stat was 19 point whatever, I would be thrilled. So what we're saying is that this is a highly significant result. The chances of this thing actually being 0 are 1.81 times 10 to the negative 51st, which is like 50 zeros and then out there, right? Almost impossible for this thing not to be significant. Questions? Will I be asking you to do linear regression on an exam? No. Should you know how to use linear regression going forward? Yeah. And you may find there are things on your job. For instance, let's say that you go to work for an ice cream company, and you notice that ice cream sales fluctuate with temperature. Does that make sense? When it's hot, people eat more ice cream. You could use linear regression to figure out what that relationship is. And then you could use the weather forecast to plan production, right? You see that there's some real practical uses for this sort of stuff. Do you want to end up with extra ice cream? It doesn't go as bad as fast as bread, but it does go bad, right? Plus you got your money tied up in it. Questions? Okay, well, I'm gonna let you go like 3 minutes early today. Bring your calculator for next time because we are going to be wearing out the keys.